But BCFS employs over 3,000 employees across the world. They have a lot of different focus areas, but it's a global system of nonprofits. And so BCFS started in 1944 as a group of Baptist women saw the need to provide a home for youth who didn't have a home, didn't have document status or any of that. And so definitely started in that orphanage and then transferred over into foster care services, so on and so forth. And we branched out different divisions all over the US and all over the world. And Common Thread is a very tiny piece of that. Very important, but very tiny. So we're known for family reunification, foster care programs, all of those things. I'm going to keep moving so I can get you guys the meat and potatoes. Of course, these are all of our core values, important to have when working with trafficking survivors. Common Thread, we are a program under the Human Trafficking Interdiction Division. We are sponsored by the Governor's Office, so we work very closely with that child sex trafficking team. We started in 2017, originally in that San Antonio area, branched out to Houston in 2018, and then down in our Rio Grande Valley area a year ago. The Rio Grande Valley area has been amazing improvement. It's been very hard to get in down there to even recognize that trafficking exists. So the work down there has been amazing. It's much different than here in Houston, where we know of it, we talk about it, there's a flood of organizations, and so they've done amazing work down there. So what is Common Thread? Relational advocacy program. We serve youth throughout the state of Texas up to the age of 22, any gender, any nationality. This is where we cover 58 counties, which looks like not very many when you see everything on the map there. We're divided into those 3 regions. That blue region is what I cover, that's where we are. And then of course, we have our Rio Grande Valley, our central Texas area. Now, in some, like Travis County, it's not highlighted, there's a program there that does what we do. Dallas has Traffic 911 that does what we do. So there is programs in some of these other areas that we don't cover. However, if there is a survivor that we identify in a county that we don't serve, you can still call it into our hotline. Let's say out here, we're looking at, we don't cover Houston County out here. So let's say you just cover a survivor in Houston County or Trinity. You guys cover Trinity and we don't cover Trinity. You can still call it in because I can guarantee you there's not a trafficking advocacy program in Trinity County. We consider it on a case-by-case basis. And so can definitely connect services that way. So our response is immediate. The moment that you call into the hotline, we respond within 90 minutes, 24/7, 365. So whoever it is that calls it into the hotline, we do the See It tool, talk it over, okay, we're going to dispatch an advocate. If it's law enforcement, we're dispatching with law enforcement. We're there on scene to be that immediate response with the care pack, food, shelter, clothing, gift cards, whatever we can, hygiene products. Do you have a place to sleep tonight? Do you need medical care? Do you need transportation? Do you have family you want to call? Immediately being that person to help navigate those services. Also being that connecting piece between lots of different services that are being involved, helping them get to those same exams, helping them speak to law enforcement if they need to speak to law enforcement, all of those things.
And you'll give us the number for that?
Yes, it's on the last slides. So that hotline is 24/7, 365. Our advocates don't work that. We have an on-call system, of course. However, the advocate that dispatches is the advocate that is assigned to the case. And they stick with them. Every now and then there may be a situation where they're not. Maybe it's a survivor that was rediscovered, and so they're assigned back to the advocate that they had or whatever. Maybe this survivor's case will connect better with this advocate, whatever it is. But usually it's the same one.
Are the callers good Samaritans or are they victims?
Survivors themselves will call in, law enforcement will call it in. Harris County has what we call care coordination, where you call it into Triad, and Triad will assign it. Montgomery County has what we call care coordination, and so through the CAC, Safe Harbor, which I think you guys may do a little bit of work with them, because I think that's the closest CAC for you guys. They will call it in, so it's kind of a variety. Parents will call in and say, I need an advocate for my child. It's a range. Anyone can call it in. to our service coordinators. Oftentimes we'll help call the human trafficking hotline and report things with whoever needs to report something. It's a variety. Other stakeholders and partners that we work with, anybody can call it in. But mostly in the areas that we have care coordination, it's set up by that CAC, that governor, or that district attorney's office is involved. And so with that, it's all the resources basically in the area that would possibly come upon a survivor is in that care coordination tool. And when you call it into that care coordination hotline, it directs the survivor to the agencies that are needed. Super amazing. Brazos County I know has care coordination. Galveston County is developing care coordination, all modeling after Harris County, which is wonderful because it makes it to where you're able to get all the resources that you're needed, not just having to call, well, this organization has a hotline. Well, this one has a hotline. We need food, or we need this, or we need that. So it kind of just centralizes it to one contact. So moving through that long-term support, let's say a kiddo is 10 years old, 15 years old, whatever it is, they can stay in our program as long as they need. We do serve up to the age of 22. However, we do transition out at that age of 22 to an adult program. Maybe they no longer need an advocate. But as I move through, we do have what we call survivor advocates, and I will speak on what they do with survivors who are in that maintenance stage. This is what some of that long-term support can look like. Regularly meeting with them, FaceTime calls, Facebook calls, 2 a.m. text messages, whatever it is, it's all about building that relationship and being that person for them to turn to. We're evidence-based. All of our advocates are fully paid employees. They all have bachelor's degrees, a lot of them have masters in social work. What I'll say is through Common Thread onboarding, I think I was in training for the first 2 months on the job. Going through that motivational interviewing, going through that trust-based relational intervention, of course that SIA tool. I assume you guys know a lot about TBRI and all of that and what that looks like. So that's that trauma-informed care model, which is wonderful. Out of TCU, which is what I was actually saying earlier, Dr. Karen Purvis. If you're not familiar with TBRI, highly recommend looking into it. And of course, shadowing and supervision. So lots of comprehensive training and all of the things to make sure that they're ready to work with a survivor in crisis.
Are the survivors mostly women or girls?
Yes, but we do have boys.
And so at that residential facility, you've got boys
That's
and
only girls.
Only girls.
Freedom Place is only girls. Our program serves boys and girls. I think it's Elevate 11 or something serves boys specifically. They're in Conroe as well. It's Elevate something. I can't think of the numbers. Unfortunately, it's like you have Traffic 911, you have Life 360, you have Love 146. I get all the numbers mixed up. But it's Elevate something. So survivor-led, this is what I was mentioning earlier. We have survivor advocates, survivor leaders is what we call them. They're survivors themselves. They come in and we meet with them regularly to identify, what are we doing, what's working, what's not, would this have helped you, did this help you, how can we change what we're doing, but also stepping in when there's a very difficult case. Our survivor leaders travel all around the state to all of our 58 counties, helping assist our advocates when needed. Our survivor leader, specifically the one that is out of our Houston office, she speaks on her story and her journey, which is super wonderful. But the way I see it is survivors need to sit at the table when it comes to how to help them. And so super important to have those survivor leaders. Our survivor leaders do help survivors that have graduated beyond our program, regularly connecting with them, maybe not like every day, but checking in, making sure everything's okay, and that kind of thing once they move on from our program. Being accessible, that 24/7, 365. I mentioned that on-call system. We have different social medias, and it's not Snapchat or anything because we know that disappears, but we do have an Instagram where survivors can message us that way. We have Facebook where they can message us that way, and so let's say they're in a bind or something, they're able to contact us that way. So all the advocates have access to those accounts. And of course, our staffing structure is emergency management informed, but I'm going to keep moving to get some more of those meat and potatoes. So we're mobile. Our advocates are not tied down to a desk. They're oftentimes in the field. They're always driving around and meeting survivors. We do only dispatch to safe locations. That's important to recognize. We're not dispatching to a trafficker's home, we're not dispatching to a brothel, stuff like that. It does have to be safe locations. However, our service coordinators and things are very good at saying, okay, where's the closest Whataburger? How can we get you to a safe location for us to dispatch? Whatever it is, how can we help you get there? We do need to keep our staff safe, and so, but they visit in treatment centers, they do all the things, move around, but we need to make sure we're being safe as we do that. So this identifies all the blue stars represent survivors and where they entered in our program. And then as they move around, this is where they moved around in our program. So where they entered and where they moved around while in our program. And the purpose of this is showing that the population is mobile, so advocates have to be mobile. As long as that survivor enters in our service area, we can follow them. So our advocates can fly to El Paso, even though we don't serve El Paso. We have survivors who are in Oklahoma, Arkansas, who've moved with family and are still on our caseload and still have an advocate. Not gonna say where, but I had met with an advocate a couple days ago, and she's like, I'm flying to here to meet my survivor who's no longer in the state. And so unfortunately, a lot of programs are restricted by borders of counties, by cities, by states, whatever it is. As long as they are possibly going to travel to where we're located in one of our counties, or they started out there, we can still follow them. And that's the part that's super amazing, because they still need that support, especially when they move to be back with family and that kind of thing. So we're collaborative, in case y'all didn't know, as we're here right now collaborating with all of you guys. I mentioned a lot about collaboration with law enforcement and those kinds of things. But we're non-competitive by design. So there are other programs in the area, not this area, but like Brazos County has Unbound that does the same work that we do. Houston has Unbound, which does the same work that we do. And so we collaborate with them because we have to. They do amazing work, we do amazing work. There's not enough advocates out there. And so although we don't serve the same survivors, we often see they'll be re-recovered, called into Unbound, called into us, so it's important that we collaborate. But it's also important that we collaborate on the matter of there's tons of other people out there who are coming upon survivors and they don't even know it. And so they need a resource when they do come upon a survivor. These are a lot of different partners that we've partnered with. Obviously the Office of the Governor, because we're sponsored by them. Department of Family Protective Services. We have a statewide MOU with DFPS, which is super important. Texas Juvenile Justice System, local police departments, district attorneys' offices, child advocacy agencies, all of those things are really important. We host quarterly webinars with Homeland Security, obviously the OVC. All of these are some of those major partnerships, really anywhere that we can serve of support. So case management. That's not our goal, but we can provide it when it's not already being provided. So as we know, a lot of CACs provide case management. They focus on connecting with resources and things like that, and therapy and whatever else that they need to connect with. Typically what we do in that case, we say, okay, great, just let us be an advocate then. Just let us build that relationship, just let us fill in those gaps. We don't need to repeat services. Work smarter, not harder. And so our advocates really focus on that relationship piece. And so case management can look like this, where you're monitoring safety, those kinds of things, case coordination, protection of victims' rights. But when we look at the pie of advocacy, case management is one little piece. 24/7 availability, that communication, unconditional positive regard, all of that falls under that advocacy piece, not just that case management. So with that, relational advocacy, case management is effective for survivors who are ready to engage in services. They need to feel safe. They have to feel safe. They have to feel like they can trust the safe resources. And typically, it takes one person to be that friend, be that relationship, and make those connecting pieces for them to want to engage in services. That one long-term trusting relationship with a safe adult. And what I always like to point here is that we're not trying to say we only want that survivor to trust our advocate and that's it. No. that survivor is being introduced to our team, they're being introduced to our partners. We're opening up that line of safe individuals, safe partners, and saying this is your village of safe resources. And making sure that it's important for us to build those partnerships because of that. Because we want them to eventually tell their story and speak to law enforcement and those kinds of things. So that felt safety, I'm not going to go too much into this because I know TBRI talks about it a lot, but there's a difference between your brain feeling like you're safe and you being physically safe. You're in that fight, flight, freeze, you're in that amygdala, you are stuck there, you're not going to realize that your surroundings are safe. And we have this conversation with foster parents a lot. Sure, you may have locks on your doors, you may have this, you may have that, you may be a believer in the Second Amendment, it doesn't matter. If they're not feeling safe, they don't trust you, their brain doesn't know they're safe, it doesn't matter. So we need to break down those chains over the brain is what I call it. Break down and build that safety in the brain for them to feel safe. And that is the whole point of what our advocates are doing. Getting them ready to engage in those services. And we'll look at the survivor, something change is what it's called. I'm like, okay, triggers. So oftentimes they're afraid of authority figures. So a lot of our advocates, they show up in jeans, they're not dressed like I am now. They're in jeans, they're in t-shirts, they look normal, professional, but normal. Just like as if they were going to the grocery store or whatever it is. It's important that they don't look like they're in any kind of position of authority. So if I showed up as an advocate dressed how I am now, they'd be like, okay, you look like you're someone important, or you look like you may work for law enforcement, or you look like this, or a teacher, or somebody that's gonna get me in trouble. And so it's important that you look, our advocates are relatable to the population that we serve. Of course, a lot of triggers is authority figures, uncertainty, telling their story, feeling rejected, and of course those power struggles. Again, that felt safety. They need to not only be safe, but feel safe. They'll never want to engage in services until they feel safe and as if they can. And oftentimes, you need to be able to co-regulate, you need to be able to self-regulate before you're even able to speak of your story. So research demonstrates that for survivors of complex trauma, felt safety is impossible in the absence of at least one consistent, trusting, genuine, respectful, reciprocal adult relationship. This is the advocate's role. So characteristics of the youth that we serve. I've spoke about this a lot, so I'm going to keep moving, but typically they're running away, oftentimes substance abuse, heightened risk-taking, all of those things fall under the youth that we serve, and all of that is described as those external regulations of the trauma that they've experienced. Here's an example of a text message between an advocate and a survivor. The survivor reaches out and says, hey, I'm so depressed, and then of course, advocate reaches back out and says, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm another advocate with common thread, are you okay? And then that survivor immediately goes into, I don't feel like myself, I lost myself, I can't find myself, I feel so useless. And so this shows how it's important for the survivor to not only be attached to their advocate, but just feeling that our program is safe, because our advocates can't work 365. They need a break too. And so we need to have that on-call system. So they may not always get the advocate that they're assigned with. They will during normal hours and that kind of a thing. But if they need something in the middle of the night or whatever it is, we always have advocates on call. So sometimes they will get another advocate. But they feel like they're trusted enough to even go into what they're experiencing. And so that's really the drive home there. The stages of change is what I was trying to say earlier. So oftentimes we see that case management isn't even effective until they're ready, but advocacy is needed at every step of the way. Majority of survivors enter our program at that plea contemplation. They're still self-harming, they're still committing crimes, they're still on drugs, they're still doing all of those things when they enter our program. And so it's a long journey, and they need that advocate all the way through. And sometimes it's hard to even say it's stages, because sometimes you go back and forth between. Same thing with, we talk about stages of grief. We know it's all over the place. It's not actually stages. And oftentimes different stages of life bring that grief up again. And so very similar here. Sometimes they kind of go back and forth. They think they're ready when they're not. They get brought back into the life, whatever it may be. But it's important to have that advocate all the way through that maintenance stage. So survivors who may need an advocate, oftentimes we target those that fall through the cracks. Ones that who refuse to sit in exams, currently in the life, been disconnected from DFPS, their foster family. We find a lot of our kiddos, they have been disconnected from DFPS and run away for months. Weren't able to find them, don't know where they were. Someone calls into the hotline, they call the hotline, and of course we're like figuring out what that whole situation was. We're contacting DFPS, as we know, we have to as well, and so making sure that we're getting them reconnected. Survivors who have histories of psychiatric hospitalization, suicide, survivors who have whose treatment, placement, and or family networks may require movement to another city. All of these things are individuals who fall through the cracks. So we're wanting to be able to make sure that we can find out where they are and connecting that way. And a conference that I attended a couple weeks ago with HATRA was saying, how do we identify those that are falling through the cracks if we're only partnering with those that are already in the system? And it's really just changing a culture. It comes down to changing culture, parents and those kinds of things, recognizing what those indicators are. Individuals who go to the grocery store looking for those tattoos, looking for just normal society, recognizing what it is. Again, this is our service area. I'm going to keep going to get to that hotline where BCFS is, where Common Thread is, where we are all over the U.S. And then this kind of sums up everything. Advocacy is a relationship focus with the outcome of targeting stabilization. Advocacy can make investigation and case management easier. Common Thread's reach allows for survivors to remain meaningfully full connected while they're in the program. This is who we serve, confirmed or clear concern, any gender identity, any legal status, physically in our service area or expected to travel there, under the age of 22. Common Thread at bcfs.net is that non-emergent. I'm going to email you guys all of this, flyers, those kinds of things so you have it. So don't worry about scrambling because we're like 3 minutes away. Just want to make sure I have time for some questions. But eligible survivors, we don't require that outcry because as we know, they don't even have trafficking in their language. So it's important to recognize that. Many of our referrals begin as clear concern and then end up being identified as a survivor. And then of course our hotline. I'm going to keep moving through this because I hate when they put that word there, like 188 thread. I'm like, we just need the numbers. Like, I understand it's fancy, but I'm like, I need the numbers. So this is our Facebook page. If you guys have your phone, you can catch the QR code right there. We share a lot of amazing resources, lots of different partners in the community that we partner with, a lot of the work that we're doing. Highly recommend following our Facebook page and other organizations throughout the area just to find out what's going on. We can use it as a tool to spread education as well, so highly recommend following us there. And then of course, there we go. There's the numbers, right? There's my contact information and there's our website as well. Our website's super user friendly. It is meant to connect with the survivor where it's not too complicated. It's all about just being there when they need someone. So our website is a great tool as well. All right, do we have any questions? I kept y'all 30 minutes over. I sped through pretty quickly.
So how are you different than DPS? I mean, I can't do the CPS.
How are we different
That
than
one I can
CPS?
stick with you.
Well, this program is optional, where DFPS, if they're in CPS
Yeah,
care,
okay.
it's more of a support. It's more of a support, more relationship focused. As we know, a lot of case management and loads of caseworkers they're a lot when it comes to CPS. And so this is specific to trafficking survivors. If anything, we want to be that connecting tool between CASA, case manager, foster parent, law enforcement. We want to help be that connecting piece between all of those organizations. But we also want to be just there for the relationship piece, right? CFPS is involved to manage their case, to know what's going on, to investigate, to be that person to look into all of that. But we're not investigators. We're not here to monitor and all of that. It's more of the relationship with the kid.
This I may have missed this, but are y'all out searching for who are survivors, even though they haven't called y'all?
Us, no. That's not our program.
You
we
go strictly by who's called in?
Yes, and so we're not out searching or anything like that. However, we do find that once we have a survivor in a caseload, oftentimes friends are discovered. That's also in the life of trafficking and things like that. But there are lots of programs that do go down to Bissonnette Street, that do go to these areas where traffickers can be discovered. And so there are organizations where that is their target. They're going down there, just to connect, just to pray with them, just to help them get out of the life. Missionaries of Hope is the specific organization that I'm thinking of. I know Elijah Rising, they do bus tours of areas that trafficking has been identified in. They do downtown Houston, they do Bissonnette, River Oaks, they do Montgomery County, they do all the different bus tours for the different areas to help identify those areas. So there are organizations that target identifying survivors.
Do most of these cases already have a CASA involved, or are these mostly cases that have not been in DPS yet? Trafficking?
Yes and no. It's more of an additive. So if you know a survivor or a kiddo on your case, if you're the CASA and you know that they've been trafficked, it would just be an additive support to help that youth.
And so
I just
if
sent
we
it to,
did,
that's who I've been texting.
okay, so like you've had this experience. Do we have to get permission, like from the caseworker or from,
So you would go through your proper channels here. You guys would contact the caseworker on that child's case, and they would essentially give permission, because the state is the one that is the guardianship of that child. Typically not an issue, not a big deal at all, but that would be the procedure for y'all. Yep.
And so what if we were that person in the grocery store that saw some, like, how do you call the number, but they're gonna leave?
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna make their way through the store.
Um,
Like, you don't know those people, so how do you?
Calling it into just the human trafficking hotline is helpful.
Just to let them know,
because-
like, I saw these
in
people
this area.
at this store, on
Mhm.
this street.
Yep.
Okay.
Or just a house in your neighborhood, right? We know there's been houses in the Woodlands, there's been houses in Katy that have known to
Well,
have
right.
traffickers coming in and out.
Yeah.
So the issue that I've seen is like my hairstylist. She was like, I thought there might have been trafficking going on at that house, but I wasn't really sure and I wanted to mind my own business. And I'm like, that's the problem.
Yeah.
It's nothing to call it into the hotline. Because you could have been that fourth person to call it into that hotline, and then that was the last thing that they needed.
Now, I understand on something like
Yeah.
that, like, but I'm thinking,
But
like,
the
you
stores
see
as
somebody
well.
in passing
Yeah.
and
The
just
stores as
to
well.
give them the location.
Yeah, because that could lead to, okay, maybe it is at a massage parlor that's down the road, in the
Yeah.
same shopping center of that grocery store.
Gotcha.
Mhm. All right, y'all.
And some of y'all have read Renting Lacey, but it is a book that I have here which goes over so much of what she said, and although the book is somewhat dated, the information
Mhm.
is absolutely not.
Um,
And also, we have
Stolen, I think is a book too. It's wonderful.
TBRI videos as well that you can check out from my library.
Yep.
Could you tell me one more time what TBR stands for?
Trust-based relational intervention.
Yep, Dr. Karen Purvis.
And it's great.
Yes.
It's amazing.
It's great.
Yeah, I think that's one thing I wish I was, I wish I was a TBR practitioner. I'd be like, let me train everywhere. It's just such a different perspective on parenting, and you don't even have to use it with, it's relational.
Yeah.
So I like joke, I'm like, I use TBR on my husband, like, or with my dogs or whatever, like, it's a joke, but it's all about communicating.
Yeah.
And so, super amazing program for sure. But I'll send resources. There's like documentaries and stuff that I recommend. There's one that's like really young girls, I think is what it's called. And actual survivor youth speak in that documentary on why they don't leave and all of that. And sometimes that's what it takes for people to understand why they don't leave, is just hearing from that survivor directly as to why. But there's lots of different resources and things like that for sure. Lots of books.
Do y'all have any more questions for Ashelee? Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you. I apologize. I'm so sorry. I feel terrible. But I will get faster, y'all. Now that I'm doing this in person again,
They
I
all
will get
just got
faster.
2 hours, so I don't
That's
think.
Yeah. I know, but I feel so bad. I want to be respectful of y'all's time. I just haven't done this in person in a while, and I forget how much I like to talk and see people. You working out of your
Yeah,
home
guys,
for-
this was her first training that
In
she got to
person.
speak in person in over a year.
Wow.
Yeah. I
She was
never
excited
never
to
done it.
come.
I was excited, yeah. When I was with the foster agency, obviously I did it every evening and the weekends and all of that, but that was, I mean, we're talking,
What success rate, because I can tell you ours was not, or has not been, maybe it will still be.
for what?
She's gone back to jail, and acted out in all the way, I mean, you know, anyway, very typical of everything you said, and has a common thread advocate. What is, I mean, because of course I beat myself, I mean, I've been with her for a year and